Still says it's sending data. It says live on Facebook. You guys seen it?
Yep, and I got live on YouTube.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Good to go.
Awesome. All right. Hey everybody. Welcome to another edition of Fantasy Inferno. As always, I'm Rob Sullivan, Bryce Frazier. And for the in-season show, Brad Menendez is going to be joining us as well. So Brad, get on the block for this show at least. Folks watch the Thursday and know how to get a hold of you. If they're just turning into Fantasy Inferno.
Every which way possible. I get messages on Twitter. I get Facebook messages. Group me. Feel free to whatever. At RotoHeatBrad or Brad Menendez on most of your social media platforms. And thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Awesome. All right. Again, we're going to be kind of a four-man show most of the weeks here through the season when we can all make it. But get into the show. This week we're talking week one, Thursday night football, everything football. Sit and start. The news notes that come out last couple of days. We've got a bunch for you. Whether you're watching live or on the YouTube, or listening on your favorite podcast app, make sure you like and subscribe. Fantasy Inferno and RotoHeat.com as well. Moving into our news and notes, and it sounds like Miles Sanders today had a full practice for the most part, but there is a possibility that they could manage his workload a little bit. And why don't we let the vet on the squad, Sully, tackle that one first? Thoughts on Miles Sanders if he's going to be limited at all in week one?
He might be, that's a real cutting edge answer, I know, but I'm not overly concerned about it, mainly based on opponent. So if he gets 15 touches, I think he'll still be fantasy relevant for you. You might not be starting him with as much confidence in week one as you typically would if he was 100%. Brings Boston Scott into the picture a little bit more, but I'd comfortably still start him. He's going to get the touches, and most importantly, he'll probably get the important touches. So he'll probably be active in and around the goal line in the red zone. So I don't have any challenges with starting him. Bryce, are you concerned with Sanders at all this week?
No, mostly because I don't own him anywhere. I think he's highly overrated on a team that likes to rotate a lot of running backs. So honestly, the news of him having his workload managed, it doesn't really surprise me because I think they're going to implement several running backs throughout the season. So, and if he practiced in full today, I would assume that he's going to get, some good touches against a weak matchup this week. So, like you said, I would find him. If I owned him, I would 100% be starting him. But I just didn't draft him in any leagues because he was going a little bit too high for my taste. But Brad, what are your thoughts on the news of Miles Sanders? Yeah. Yeah.
Also, again, we're talking redraft, so he's probably not one of your starters, but another full practice report for the Eagles. Jalen Reagor returned to practice after his shoulder injury. So, there was some early concern there that he might be heading down the same road as Tyrell Williams because it was a very similar injury. But that appears to be alleviated, and good chance he'll play as well. Although, again, in redraft, probably not starting for you. Looking at rookie running backs, Cam Akers was listed third on the Rams depth chart. J.K. Dobbins listed fourth on the Ravens depth chart. What are we making of these early season depth charts in general? And do we expect much out of these two early in the season, Bryce?
I do not expect anything out of any rookie running backs besides Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the beginning of the season. It doesn't surprise me that they're listed low on the depth chart. Usually they're going to get some carries. So whatever they're ranked on the depth chart, I don't care because teams didn't draft them that early not to use them. So teams are going to use them and see what they look like out on the field. And if they prove that they're being efficient, then they're going to get more touches throughout. And then eventually, hopefully, for at least these two, Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins, take over. So it doesn't really bother me because I refuse to start any rookie running backs week one other than Clyde Edwards-Helaire because none of them are feature backs right away. So that's kind of my opinions on it. Sully, what are your thoughts on it?
I have kind of two split opinion on it. In terms of Akers, I'm not overly concerned. Darrell Henderson doesn't pose as much of a threat to me, especially with him nursing a hamstring all camp long. I believe that Malcolm Brown's listed on top of that as sort of a veteran. Thanks very much for being here. He'll get the lion's share of the work early, but I'd start Akers this week, to be totally honest with you. I think he's a flex play. I'd have really no problems doing that. Dobbins, I think it's a little bit different. I think he's going to be eased into that system a little bit more. I don't think Mark Ingram's really going anywhere anytime soon. And there'll be a sprinkling of Gus Edwards and Justice Hill as well. But in the end, I think Dobbins will probably in the back half of that season start to grab more of a role there and more of the role. But early on, this early in the season, in this wacky offseason, I'd leave Dobbins on my bench, but I would go with Akers. I think he's going to see a decent amount. Mainly, I think he's going to catch the ball enough to be relevant in week one. Brad?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ultimately, the rookie running backs, by and large, should have the best opportunity to actually give you fantasy production this year. But I think it's going to take time for Dobbins. Akers should have a clear path to playing time. And he should be familiar from his days at Florida State playing behind a leaky offensive line. So I think Akers will still give you good production. CEH should be, obviously, like you guys said, clearly the best one to play week one. But, be cautious with a lot of these guys. Definitely make sure you've paired them with a back that is going to get good production, just in case they are a bit slow going.
Yeah, and for me, Clyde, I would definitely, think I'm going to probably start him if I have him in a redraft league. Akers and Taylor are probably flex considerations for me. I have no problem starting either there. Dobbins, I want to wait and see what happens. Just with the way that depth chart shook out, and he's got the most in front of him, just from production from last year. All right, we had a really big deal. DeAndre Hopkins gets 2 years, $54 million. That's not totally huge because it's a pretty short contract. But what's crazy is $42,750,000 of that guaranteed at signing. That's a heck of a lot of money guaranteed. And in total Brad Menendez fashion, what I imagine Brad would do is he negotiated the whole thing himself. He's his own agent. So Brad, since you're the guy I most imagine to be his own agent and be wheeling and dealing like this, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I negotiated my own deal with Roto Heat, which is why I'm making the big bucks. No, it's one of those things where, and if I remember correctly, I was just trying to pull up his contract on Spot Track. I think they extended it. So basically, it's an extension of his current deal. So it's really, 5 years, where the last year's voidable and all sorts of stuff. I mean, we've seen players negotiate their own deals in the past, so it's not unprecedented. An agent tends to get you a little bit more at the table, but it's a good deal. I mean, for what he is, I mean, that's a lot of money. And we knew he was going to be solid in Arizona. I feel comfortable with him still as a wide receiver one in Arizona. And I think this solidifies it because this is their guy, and they paid him like their guy. So I feel good about it. Bryce, how do you feel?
Yeah, I feel great. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins has always been in the conversation as arguably the number one wide receiver year in and year out, no matter who his quarterback is. So it's good to see, your superstar players get paid. So I don't really pay much attention to salary caps and things like that. So I can't really comment on the money part of it, but I know that he's now the highest paid wide receiver. So, and he's arguably one of the best. So it makes sense. What do you think, Sully?
I'm happy to be represented at Roto Heat by Brad Menendez, first and foremost, as my agent, so I'm comfortable in all of my dealings going forward. I will say that I think it's a smart deal for Arizona. This deal it looks like fell in their lap right out of the gate. They unload a pretty big contract at the running back position that enables them to reset there. They add a stud number 1 wide receiver. It's a little bit of heavy money guarantee, but you got to pay somebody, and you might as well pay a guy that's proven and has done it time and time again. I will say it's a lot easier to negotiate your own contract when you're DeAndre Hopkins than it would be if you're a depth roster guy in your team. But hats off to him, well done. And I just keep thinking to myself that Bill O'Brien could have given this contract to DeAndre Hopkins and signed Leonard Fournette off the street.
Yeah, that's probably, I agree with that for sure. Another contract that kind of fell under the radar a little bit with D-Hop's big deal and some of the other big deals is Keenan Allen gets a 4-year, $80 million deal. That's a big one. That's a high-paid wide receiver deal. But also a lot of talks about Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara possibly reaching new deals before Sunday's games roll around. And Bryce, what do you think about those?
Yeah, I didn't even know about the Keenan Allen deal until I read up on this. And I've slowly grown fond of him for this year just because he's being passed up so late in like a lot of the redrafts I've gotten where I'm drafting him as a flex player, and I couldn't be more happy with Keenan Allen as a flex player. I'd be happy with him as a wide receiver too, so a flex is just has me extremely excited. He's consistent, and I'm hoping he's quarterback proof. I mean, Phillip Rivers wasn't very good anyway, so hopefully he keeps putting up numbers that he has in the past. The new deals, though, Aaron Jones one's kind of surprising me because I feel like most of, I'm sure you can relate that when you guys draft A.J. Dillon, you thought maybe Aaron Jones was somebody that you were just going to use and abuse for this year and let go. So that's interesting to me, but I'm more interested to see how he would perform if Aaron Rodgers wasn't there because I know he's the main reason he gets to see the field in the first place. So what are your thoughts on these new deals, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, the Keenan Allen's deal is basically like Keenan Allen's fantasy, the way people treat him in fantasy. Kind of gets overlooked, but he's always productive. He's going to make people pay for ignoring him in your redrafts. If you took him in the wide receiver 2 flex range, then you're getting a wide receiver 1 for a cheap price. I mean, he's always productive. I would venture to say he's quarterback proof, but Tyrod Taylor's not a bad quarterback for what Keenan Allen does. Tyrod Taylor should get him the ball just fine. Mike Williams is hurt, so that means Keenan Allen will be more of a focal point for at least for the first few weeks until Williams is back. I mean, I feel good about Keenan Allen. He's a great receiver. He had a couple years of injuries, but it's been a while. So I think he's well past some of those quirky injuries. And remember, they were all kind of quirky, punctured livers or whatever it was that was punctured and all sorts of crazy stuff. Other than that, I mean, I think that was the biggest of the deals. Aaron Jones, I think, is an interesting deal. It's more interesting. I just don't understand what Green Bay is really doing. And Silvers may be more in tune with him, seeing as it's his team. But I do remember on draft weekend him freaking out because A.J. Dillon was their second round pick, and it made no sense. So, I think.
And then they got the halfback.
Yeah, then they go and they draft guys that aren't really meant for the NFL or whatever. But I think the Kareem Hunt deal, which I don't know that we mentioned, I think Kareem Hunt's deal is the most interesting of the deals because that one went under the radar too. But I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about that deal as well, about how that affects him and Chubb. But Sully, what's your take on all these?
Well, I'll start with Keenan Allen, and I love the deal for the Chargers. I love the fact that the Chargers are spending a little bit of money, right? They did Joey Bosa's new big deal, locked up Ingram as well, and now they've signed Keenan Allen. So kind of in a notorious sort of tighter-fisted with their money organization, opening it up, which is really good. Biggest takeaway for me with Keenan Allen was watching Hard Knocks and Anthony Lynn watching film and talking about blocking. Mm-hmm. And his quote was, "Feed Keenan Allen because he blocks." So that made me feel pretty darn good about all the Keenan Allen that I've been getting, and similar to Bryce, at a great value. Aaron Jones, I don't really know what to make about that, other than I think that, like I've said previously on this show, is that I really feel as though Matt LaFleur wants to be like his mentor Kyle Shanahan and have multiple backs in his backfield that he can use in multiple different situations. So the Packers bringing him back or trying to bring him back doesn't surprise me at all. And the Kareem Hunt deal, I agree with Brad, is really interesting. It first kind of made me think of, was Nick Chubb maybe not long for Cleveland? And then I looked at their salary cap structure, and they have a ton of cap space. And it makes total sense for them to do this. It's really not a ton of money for the back that Kareem Hunt is. And with Stefanski running that offense, they're going to have plenty of times where they're going to run two running backs out of the backfield, pardon me. And I think it's interesting. Certainly do.
Yeah, I think Keenan Allen getting locked up is a good deal. Not so much even for Tyrod Taylor for 2020, but for Justin Herbert down the road. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that he's quarterback of the future as he gets through his growing pains of his rookie year. Because I fully expect him to be the starter in 2021, and you want a security blanket like that. Kareem Hunt, that's a economical deal, really. 2 years, $13.5 million for the Browns. I mean, that's a good deal for them. Still gives them the ability, if the whole Chubb Hunt thing continues to work out well, the two-back system, to sign Chubb to a longer-term deal. So I think that's a good move. Kamara, there were a whole lot of rumors last week about he was holding out. Oh, but he was in the building. Oh, they asked for a trade, but they didn't ask for a trade. I think ultimately, I don't know if the Saints have enough money to sign him where they're at.
Yeah.
What are they, like $25 million in the hole for next year on salary cap already? I mean, you paid Taysom Hill $16 million to be your third string quarterback. I mean, you're just shooting yourself in the foot with that. So I think if they're going to try and unless they're 100% certain that Drew Brees' contract is off the books next year, like he is retiring this year no matter what, I don't know that they can make a deal right now that makes sense to me. And as for Aaron Jones, just like you guys said, I'm a Packer fan. I have no idea what's going on in Green Bay. Why you draft two guys basically to be running backs, a running back and a halfback / tight end, when you've already got two running backs, especially if you were considering re-signing them. Plus, today on the Pat McAfee show, Aaron Rodgers was talking about how probably the guy he was most impressed with in camp was Jamal Williams. Because all winter, apparently, all offseason, Jamal Williams was out running wide receiver routes with guys, around where he lives. And he was sending videos to Rodgers and getting, okay, I did this. Is that what you want me to do, or do you want me to do something else if I'm out running that route? And they were having that conversation all the time, and so I don't know what to make of that backfield. Glad I stayed away from it. I mean, I'm just going to root for the Packers to get more than 7 wins, and in a division of teams, I think that are 7-9 teams. I think it's a division full of 7-9 teams. So, but that's what I think. So. I don't know what's going on in that backfield.
I still think 9-7 wins that division.
I do too. I think it's a bunch of 7-9 teams, and somebody's going to get away with a couple of them, and they're going to finish 9-7 and win that division.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we want to remind everybody, get your questions in on Facebook or on YouTube. We'll get those answered at the end of the show. We're going to move into Thursday night football a little bit to preview Texans and Chiefs. And as we go through this, let's save kind of our maybe our wide receiver discussion towards the end, because that can lead into our starts and sits, because we do have one player, I believe, from this game on our starts and sits. Maybe 2 of them. We got 2 of them in there, so we're gonna save wide receiver for last. But let's kind of break down the quarterback and the running back position to start here, and let's include the tight ends with that. Let's break down those 3 main positions right away. Sully, your thoughts on how this game is going to go for Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, David Johnson, CH, and the tight ends in this one?
I think this is a high-scoring football game, and I think both quarterbacks are no-brainer, must-start guys. When you look at the backfields, I'd start both of those lead running backs with confidence. I don't know if there's a wide receiver. I know you don't want me to talk about it, but I'd pretty much start. Put it this way. If you're Kansas City, if you have 2 feet and a heartbeat, I'm probably starting you on Thursday night. And that's their elite guys, right? So their top couple of wide receivers, their tight end without hesitation, and their running backs. On the Houston side of the ball, there's not really a tight end I want to start. And there's some uncertainty at wide receiver that I'll leave that for now. But that's about that for me. Brad, Brad.
So
Rob,
before we move on quick, I just have a question. You're saying the top wide receivers for Kansas City are going to start. Do we know what that is beyond Tyreek Hill? Because, I mean, depth chart-wise, it's Sammy Watkins. Hype-wise, it's McCole Hardman. So who are you kind of thinking there?
I think it's Sammy Watkins, and McCole Hardman will eventually take that role away from him. McCole Hardman's still learning this game, and he showed last year that he has incredible big play ability. But I think it's probably a split, to be totally honest with you. But I would say that Sammy's their true number 2 right now. They had such a out to get rid of him, and surprisingly brought him back. They have plans for Sammy Watkins. Mr. Bryce, what do you think?
Yeah, this couldn't be a more exciting game. For just football fans and fantasy football fans, because you ideally would think on paper this is going to be a shootout, right? You got fast wide receivers on both sides of the ball. You got great quarterbacks on both sides of the ball. You got new running backs on both teams that people are interested to see what they can do. David Johnson was once arguably the number 1 pick in that 1 year for a lot of people. So you're kind of hoping that he can maybe show a glance of what he once was. It's an exciting game, and you hope there's a lot of points. But I agree with basically everything you said. There's only one wide receiver for the Chiefs in Hill that I feel extremely comfortable starting. The Texans ones we'll talk about later, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing both running backs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like I said, I wasn't as high on most people, but he's in a position for you and I, Sully, to eat our words. I wouldn't be mad if he did, in the sense of it's always exciting to see new players come into the game and light it up. I'd be a little sad because I don't have any shares of them, but it's gonna be a good game tomorrow. Brad, what do you think?
Yeah, we gotta put in perspective that this is preseason game 1, basically. I mean, none of these guys have gotten live contact, live action. I mean, they're obviously the coaches are simulating it, so I try to be cautiously optimistic that it'll be a high-scoring game. My anticipation is it's going to be high-scoring because of broken plays, missed tackles, or broken tackles. I mean, all sorts of the flukiest things you can imagine this first week in all these games. I would expect that to mean good things for some of the big play guys, the Tyreek Hills, the Will Fullers, your running backs, Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, Kelsey. Those are probably all very startable guys. Sammy Watkins, I maybe it's because he's burned me too many times over the years that I've kind of given up hope that he's going to be relevant more than 3 or 4 times a year, and I hate trying to guess which 3 or 4 games those are. So I don't own shares of Sammy because I don't want to even have to do that. This is probably a game that you could feel comfortable starting in because a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. So eventually things are gonna happen for him. So I feel comfortable with both these offenses. Anytime these guys face off, it's high scoring games. So I would expect it to be a great first game of the season, and ultimately in the end, football's back, and that's what matters most. So I'm ready to see some of these guys get into it. Rob, what are you thinking, brother?
Yeah, I think it's got the potential to be an exciting game, a fun game, but I think ultimately, for me, I see the Chiefs winning by multiple scores. I don't think it's going to be a shootout to the end by any means. Again, there could definitely be some broken plays, and that benefits, like you said, the big play guys. But it also means the big play guys have to be doing their job too. And for me, one wide receiver in particular, I'm not huge on, and so we'll get to that here in just a moment. But I agree, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Patrick Mahomes, roll them all out there. Possibly flexing Darrell Williams in spots for goal line work. On the Houston side, I think you're starting Deshaun Watson. Starting David Johnson. You're definitely considering all the wide receivers and all the tight ends, Graham and Akins. They could both have some work in the red zone. So, I mean, really, I have no problem if you're starting pretty much all these guys in this one. Let's move into our wide receiver start sits, though. And Bryce, why don't you kick it off? You've got a start from this game. One of these Houston wide receivers, you want him in your lineup.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody listening to the beginning of this podcast is like, why are they not talking about Brandon Cooks? But he's definitely on my start list. In most redrafts, the ones I'm in, he's getting drafted as like one of the first flex options. A lot of times, and I'll happily sit him in there. I would even almost be comfortable sitting him in wide receiver 2 spot. When you talk about this guy, he has had 1,000-yard season every season except last year and his rookie year, and he's done it with multiple teams. So he's definitely got the talent. He's a speedy receiver, and I see him like kind of taking that more of that Hopkins role rather than Fuller, where he looks more, where Deshaun Watson looks more for Cooks, especially since Cooks is more durable and he's willing to run more into the middle of the field. So, and again, I feel like everybody, especially last year, everybody and their mother loves starting a wide receiver that's going against the Chiefs. And this is the one I'm looking for in this game. So what are your thoughts on Brandon Cooks this week, Brad?
He's one concussion away from retiring, I would guess.
Yeah.
That's my big concern. But Fuller, I mean, you could look at every one of these receivers, Randall Cobb, Fuller, and Cooks, and they all have their red flag. I don't have any issue with you leaning on Cooks. I'm going to go with Fuller because I know Watson likes him, and I haven't seen the chemistry with Cooks and Watson. Like, arguably, Cooks is the better player. But Fuller, when healthy, is a guy that Watson likes and leans on. They're both big play threats, and I could easily see them both getting, 75 to 100 yards and a touchdown in this game. Like, it's just the way that the game rolls out. Like, David Johnson could easily just be a ground and pound type guy because we've seen him declining in the last few years. Is it him? Was it Arizona? Whatever. But I could easily see them throwing the ball a lot because the Chiefs secondary is not strong outside of Tyrann Mathieu. Juan Thornhill is a second-year guy and still developing, and their corners are not great, and I don't know that they have the speed to hang with these guys. So I don't have a problem with Cooks. I would start him if I owned him. I have a couple of Fuller shares in redraft, and I'm starting them, and I'm happy with it. I think, as long as he's healthy, he's going to get targeted. Sully, what do you think, brother?
Yeah, Brad, I pretty much echo your thoughts, too. If there's any concern I have with Brandon Cooks, it's health. It's not talent-related. Bryce mentioned his number of 1,000-yard seasons, which is pretty remarkable considering he did it in 3 different cities. Mm-hmm. I do lean towards Will Fuller being the guy I would like, because as long as Will Fuller is healthy and on the field, Deshaun Watson loves throwing him the football. His numbers with Watson are disgusting. Like, they're not even attainable numbers, but he continues to do it, and then he gets hurt. So, Randall Cobb in the slot, I think he adds them a little bit better of a component than Kiki Kute certainly did. And then there's Kenny Stills, who's also a hamstring away from being on IR. So it's a really interesting group of wide receivers. I do think this is a game that you can start Cooks and or Fuller and probably even flex Randall Cobb if you don't have good matchups on Sunday. But yeah, if I own Cooks, and I'm trying to think if I do. I don't think I do. I would start him. Now, sorry, I should know this. Did he practice today?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
limited.
So he limited practice today. He's going to go tomorrow. So I think that maybe I'm a little bit concerned because it's I believe it's a hamstring, but I'd put Fuller ahead of Cooks, but I would start them both is my long-winded answer. Mr. Silvers?
Well, I would say this: if Brandon Cooks is healthy, he's the guy I'd prefer to start on that team. And this is going to lead right into my first sit at the wide receiver position, which is Will Fuller. If Brandon Cooks is healthy, I'm sitting Will Fuller. Now, we think Chiefs, we think shootout, right? But would it shock you guys to realize that last year the second toughest scoring defense for wide receivers in fantasy football was the Kansas City Chiefs? Yes, they don't have a superstar cornerback, a shutdown guy. They don't have a Jalen Ramsey, but the defensive scheme that they used, they were very effective against wide receivers last year. Also, I think Will Fuller has a handicap in place, as apparently do all the Texans, because those hamstrings can go whenever they want. So, 8 routes, and they might have that hamstring popping, and who knows what's going to happen. I feel safer with Brandon Cooks, again, because he could go all over the field. Where, to me, Will Fuller, the reason he's my sit is he's based on the big play, and we didn't see the Chiefs allowing the big play that often in defensively last year to wide receivers. Sully, thoughts on my sit of Will Fuller?
I don't agree. I think that he's going to be Watson's 1B all season as long as he can stay on the field. So the Chiefs, to Brad's point, he knows the defense is a heck of a lot better than I do. I don't know where the Honey Badger is going to focus and spend much of his time, but I'd be going away from him. And the only way that the Texans have a lick of a chance of winning this football game is if they score a ton, because their defense is terrible. So I think you got to start both those guys. And I would, like I said earlier, I'd comfortably start Will Fuller. Bryce?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Silvers. I think we're on the same page where we think that Brandon Cooks is going to be the guy. Especially when I play redrafts, I don't like players that are inconsistent, and I just feel like I don't have the stats in front of me, but I just feel like Fuller's been kind of consistent, been kind of like more of a boomer bust player that can definitely win you games, but a lot of times when he busts, it really might not hurt you because a lot of times you don't have him as like your number one or even sometimes your number two receiver. So I wouldn't feel bad about starting Fuller in a flex spot, but I'd have to be kind of thin in my depth. So I overall agree. I think Brandon Cooks is the go-to guy. If I had to choose one, I'm going to choose Cooks every time until I see a pattern. What about you, Brad? And you already talked about it, but.
And I do have the stats in front of me. I do have some stats, I should say. I don't agree. Well, I don't agree because I know Fuller's at least more healthy than Cooks currently, and that's the only reason that I lean on him. If they're both healthy and everything's square, I like Cooks as the better receiver. I'll say that now. I agree with you guys. Cooks is a better receiver when healthy. I think Fuller is currently more healthy than Cooks, so I'm going to lean Fuller because with Deshaun Watson, the dude catches 70% of his passes. So if he gets targeted, 6 to 8 to 10 times in this game, which is he could, I mean, you're getting a considerable amount of catches, and he averages, 13 to 15-ish yards per catch with Deshaun Watson at quarterback. I mean, the numbers look better for me in this route. Now, Kansas City does do a good job against receivers, typically. When you look at Houston, though, Houston does a good job against Kansas City passing the ball. So I would say that this is going to probably be a high-scoring game, and I think things are going to look good for both squads ultimately in the fantasy production. So I'm comfortable with Will Fuller, comfortable with Cooks. I think ultimately they're both going to probably look pretty good after the night's over. How about you, Mr. Sullivan? Did you go Sullivan?
Yeah, I went, man.
Okay. Back to Rob.
All right. Well, let's move into some other starts and sits here. And, Sully, why don't you give us your start at wide receiver? And give us your start and your sit. Talk about both of them, and then we'll talk about them.
Sure. I am starting DJ Moore, the Carolina Panthers. I think that he's in a really good spot in this offense with Teddy Bridgewater, running slants and routes out of the slot. I think he's going to be a heavily targeted wide receiver. I think the Raiders still leave a little bit to be desired on the defensive side of the football. I also think this one will be a bit of a higher scoring game just due to those kind of components, like average to lesser than defenses, especially on the Carolina side. So I'm going to start DJ Moore with some confidence in week 1. And my sit is Devontae Parker in Miami. I know he's got a good connection with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but Preston Williams is back and he is healthy and was the leading target guy, was the leading receiver for the Dolphins prior to tearing his ACL, unfortunately, in week 8 last year. I think Mike Gesicki still stays highly involved in that Dolphins offense. He's a favorite of Fitzpatrick's as well. And I think the Patriots are still a decent defense, even with all the guys that have opted out. So I'm going to sit Parker in week 1. What do you think of those, Mr. Menendez?
Yeah, I mean, I would err on the side of caution when it comes to Parker as well. I think Preston Williams will probably get more targets, so I'm comfortable with that. I don't really have any issues with either of those. I think you well done, Mr. Sullivan. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Bryce,
My agent.
tear them apart.
Well, we had the same. I revised my sit, and I didn't even realize that you had Devontae Parker, and I also put him. Again, the Patriots secondary only lost Patrick Chung, which we drafted as replacement anyway. So I'm all on board with sitting Devontae Parker. And DJ Moore, I love DJ Moore this year. I think he's being undervalued in redraft, and I expect another step forward this upcoming year. I almost think he's a start every week unless he starts the season off pretty bad. So I am on board with your picks as well.
So hold on, let me ask you a question then, real quick, Bryce. So have you seen Matt Rule's offense? Are you comfortable that it's going to transition to the NFL pretty well? Like, I like the hot take. I just want to understand it because I'm kind of in the middle, and I feel like I need to be sold on DJ Moore as a weekly start. What's the insider info that I don't know that should get me all hot and bothered about Carolina?
I guess I don't know the coaching change necessarily, but I think that Teddy Bridgewater is an upgrade at quarterback, and DJ Moore performed well last year with a worse quarterback. And I think that the Panthers defense is very bad, and they're going to be in games where they're going to have to throw the ball the entire game just to keep up with the other team, whether they're bad or good. So, and I think DJ Moore is the guy. I like the addition of Robbie Anderson as well. I think I've touched on that. And you have a stud running back that, no one's questioning in the backfield. It's mostly just because of the addition of Teddy Bridgewater that I like DJ Moore to take another step this year. So,
yeah.
It's acceptable, but you now have their quarterback, Cam Newton. So,
yeah, that's true.
So I can't really argue with either of those.
I need to jump in now. I'm ruining the show. Brad, is it Rule's offense?
So Joe, that's the thing you have to figure out. Joe Brady, this is his first time really calling an offense. So how much of it really is going to be Rule and how much will be Brady is a big question to answer. I don't know. So at LSU, Joe Brady had help. There was a passing game coordinator to help him with the passing game. So that's the $1 million question. I don't know that answer to, and I just wasn't sure if maybe Bryce had seen or heard something that he was I'm super, super pumped because of this
cool.
thing.
It's cool. So, I'm totally ruining the show list, but I have, the way I see it, I have DJ Moore as a top 10 wide receiver this year. So I'm totally on board with that. This team stinks. The defense is terrible. And Matt Rule surrounded himself with players he knows. He brought Robbie Anderson in. He brought in Teddy Bridgewater because Brady was the guy that was saddled with bringing Bridgewater into the Saints organization. So I think they know their players, and I really see DJ Moore excelling in that offense. And I almost look at what Michael Thomas did, and it's not comparing Michael Thomas and DJ Moore, but Michael Thomas was in fact, I think he was a more effective wide receiver last year in the 5 games with Bridgewater than he was with Breeze. So I think Moore is a slam dunk this year. And I
am completely on board with that. Like, I agree. Moore's a slam dunk. The only thing I have to add to this is Joe Brady was the passing game coordinator at LSU.
I thought they had Scott Linehan there.
Scott Linehan was the offensive coordinator, I believe, right? Or what was the guy's? No.
Maybe I have it backwards then. Maybe it was backwards. I knew he didn't call the offense by himself. I knew there was another piece in there.
Right. They had the offensive coordinator, the guy who'd been there forever, and then Joe Brady was the guy who brought in the influx, the big passing game this last year. So, but I agree, DJ Moore. I've got him highly ranked, a guy who's gonna rock on, and the same with Parker. Just not feeling comfortable with him. Brad, who are your guys this week?
I'm going to go with people that nobody talks about. I'm starting T.Y. Hilton. That's why no one talks about him. He's not real. T.Y. Hilton against the Jags because, well, he's probably going to be facing Igbenogany, who's a rookie, and he's going to torch him all game long. And then I'm sitting Calvin Ridley against Seattle. I think Julio has a big game against Seattle, but I'm not comfortable with Calvin against Seattle. Seattle's defense, with the addition of Jamal Adams and some of these pieces in the secondary, I think they have enough to limit what Atlanta does outside of Julio. I think Julio still goes off and has a great game. Sully.
Okay.
Change my mind.
T.Y. Hilton, I completely agree, and we're going to talk about why in a little bit. Calvin Ridley's my boy. I can't believe you just did that to me. I wasn't prepared for it. I don't know, man. Like, how many passes is Matt Ryan going to attempt?
55.
40 plus?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, man. That leaky defensive line, Gurley might have a good game this week.
That's valid. I'll give you that. I think I'm at a loss for words, my friend. I think at very worst, Calvin Ridley is a flex, so I am not sitting him, and I'll pass it over to Bryce.
Yeah, I agree with T.Y. Hilton for sure against Jacksonville. I don't think there's much you have to say around it. The Jacksonville defense just looks. They have so many players I've never even heard of on their starting roster, and I think they upgraded at QB with Phillip Rivers. And T.Y. Hilton's, looking to maybe have a good bounce back season. With sitting Calvin Ridley, unless you're super deep at wide receiver, I can't justify that where he's getting drafted in redrafts. Most people are drafting him as wide receiver 2. In rare occasions does he drop into a flex option. So unless you're getting great matchups on some of your bench players, can I justify sitting Calvin Ridley? I think they put Jamal Adams over the top to make sure Julio doesn't burn him deep, and I think that just leaves it open more for Calvin Ridley, in my opinion, for this week. So that's kind of my take on it. What do you think, Silvers?
Well, I just want to know, when's the last time the Falcons-Saints didn't end up in a shootout with both quarterbacks throwing 40-plus passes? Like I feel when both Breeze and Ryan are on the field. Let me preface it that way. I don't think Bridgewater was throwing like that last year, but I mean this game's always a shootout. I want those guys for sure.
The Falcons play the Seahawks.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, I thought it was Falcons Saints.
I'm about to say, the last time it was a shootout between the Falcons and the Seahawks was 2017, and that was only 34-31. The last game was 2019. It was 27-20. It was a bit of a low score.
Yeah,
Not
I
the
guess
best
I
in the
can't.
business for nothing, folks.
Yeah. It's Saints in Tampa Bay. That's right. Okay.
That'll be a shootout.
My fault. Getting ahead of myself for the big Saints Falcons matchup, down the road.
Hey.
But no, we're talking all off season. We've been hearing the Falcons are going to have 2 top 12 receivers. Seahawks defense doesn't look that great either. I don't see where you're sitting Calvin Ridley. I mean, even if he doesn't get a lot of targets, in his 2 years in the NFL, he gets touchdowns.
Except against the Seahawks in 2019. He had 4 for 70 with no touchdowns. Julio.
Where was the game?
The game was in Georgia, in Atlanta Stadium.
I have no counterpoint then. Continue, please, sir.
Anybody? YouTube chat, you got anything you want to add?
Yeah. Oh, I'm starting Ridley all day. I don't agree with you. So you can read whatever you want about 2019. I'm still starting Calvin Ridley.
He's my wide receiver 15 this week, so I'm with Silvers.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley's my guy, my boy. He's been I drafted him, I think, in damn near every dynasty league when he was a rookie. I love the kid, so I mean I'm rolling him out all the time. He will not sit once this year for me, except possibly when he's on his bye week.
If he doesn't sit on his bye week, then we got to question him.
Well, I don't know. I just think he's maybe that good. All right, so we got one more start and one more sit to get through. That's my start, Bryce's sit. Let's start off. I'll preface my start. Bryce, you preface your sit, and then we'll have the other guys kind of weigh in here. My start is Stephon Diggs. He is without a doubt the wide receiver 1 for the Buffalo Bills. He's a guy who runs great deep routes. The only question is, can Josh Allen not overthrow him, right? But guess what? He's going to be wide open all day because the Jets defense is another god-awful defense. So he can overthrow him 4 times for, 80-yard bombs, and there's still a good chance, in my opinion, that Stephon Diggs finishes the day with 120 yards and at least a touchdown. I'm starting him hands down across the board this week. Bryce, who's your sit?
Well, we don't really have to talk about my sit because it was Devontae Parker, who was
Okay, so
the
let's
same
talk my
as Sully.
then.
Yeah, but I agree. I love Stephon Diggs this year. I'm one of the people who think that he actually kind of, his value went up, not a ton, but slightly. And, I talked about it where his quarterback play or the quarterback accuracy obviously is going to be lower, but I think he now becomes the obvious number one and sees more volume. And that's all that you really have to say about it. I think he sees more targets, which hopefully he turns into more production. So I'm definitely agreeing with your start this week. Sully, what do you think about Stephon Diggs?
I think it's a good call. I think it's a cherry picking call, to be totally honest, based on the defense that he's playing. So, and that's not a shot at you, Silvers. I was just saying I think it makes sense to start Stephon Diggs. I will say that they better get him some production early in that game because I don't think they're going to need to throw the ball after the second half starts. So Zach Moss could even be relevant in this one with Devin Singletary, and you could see Dawson Knox get involved and Cole Beasley. And I think this is a knock the rust off of everything that might be wrong in your offense for the Bills. So yes, Diggs is a start, but I don't see 120 plus yards. I do see him maybe scoring a touchdown, 8 catches, 70, 80 yards, which is fine. Brad?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough for me because it's more Allen. How do I feel about him than Diggs? I love Diggs. I wanted him anywhere I could get him, and then he went to Buffalo, and I had to think about it for a second. I'm like, man, can Josh Allen take that next step? And that's going to be the big question all year until he proves us wrong. I would start Diggs, though. I'm perfectly fine with the Diggs starting. I believe of all the players that are going to experience the broken play success, it's Diggs. I mean, the Jets are trotting out just a bunch of just nobodies on defense. I mean, and if any Jets wind up watching this at some point, sorry, it's not your fault. I blame Adam Gase for what's happening to you guys. So, Diggs should be experiencing lots of broken plays because he's an ankle breaker. I mean, that guy's got such good moves. So Diggs, I'm comfortable starting. He's one of those guys that I would be starting on a pretty regular basis and feeling comfortable with it. So.
All right. Well, guys, we're about 50 minutes in here. We're doing a lot of agreeing. So how about we hop on our well, we're doing quite a bit of agreeing. Not all agreeing, but how about as we go through the rest of these, we kind of hop on our team chat here on our call. If we got something to add, so we can maybe move along a little quicker. But let's get into running backs, and let's start with Brad's start and sit of the week.
This is a tough one because I would say like a guy like Miles Sanders because Washington's defense is rough. But for me, I'm gonna still lean on Miles Sanders just because I feel like against Washington he should have a big week, and it sounds like he's healthy by all accounts, at least healthy enough to play. And sit wise, this one I've been struggling with. I would sit any Detroit running backs this week against Chicago. I mean that's whoever they decide to trot out, if it's Carrion or AP, DeAndre Swift, the ghost of Barry Sanders, whoever's their running back this week, I would sit him.
I'd start Barry Sanders over all of them.
I don't know if this offensive line could protect for him. So for me, Sanders is the questionable start, but I would start him because I just don't trust Washington's defense early. They have a good defensive line, but there's not a lot behind him, and Sanders is good enough to get past that first level and make some things happen out there. So Sully, what do you think about Sanders and the Detroits?
I'll be quick. I agree with you. I do think you have to start Miles Sanders because I think he's still going to be involved enough to be fantasy relevant to warrant that start. Detroit's a mess, man, with Peterson coming to town, Swift battling injury. I think that, that's a backfield. Let's let things shake out there in Detroit before we figure out what we're going to do in terms of starting those guys and let that wait for a week or two. Bryce?
Yeah, I agree. And when you think about redraft, nobody's drafting Miles Sanders. He's going in the second round in most redrafts, so nobody's going to bench their second round pick in a redraft. Sometimes in the early third as well. So he's an almost guaranteed start in everybody that drafted him in a redraft. And yeah, I'm steering clear of all. I don't think I own a single share of any Lions running back in all however many leagues I'm in. So. And if I did, I'm definitely not starting him against the Bears defense. So I also agree with you, Brad. Rob? Silver?
Yeah, I got nothing to add. I'm 100% on board.
Yeah.
Sully, who are your
I agree.
guys?
I am starting James Conner on Monday night against the Giants, and I am sitting Melvin Gordon of the Denver Broncos. I think that James Conner, when healthy, is without a doubt one of the slam dunk starts at the running back position. He's got the band back together, other than AB, of course, but he has Ben Roethlisberger back. Last time he played more than 6 quarters with Roethlisberger, he was running back 6 on the season and only 13 games played. And he even managed 14.6 average points per game in PPR last year with the Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges show. So I'm starting him with confidence against a Giants defense that I just don't think is very good. And I'm not hearing a whole lot of good stuff about Melvin Gordon out of camp with the Broncos. And I'm starting to think that, and I wasn't on this train of thought early in the season, but I'm starting to think that Philip Lindsay is going to be a heck of a lot more involved than I thought. So I'm going to shy away from those two. What do you think of that, Rob?
Yeah, again, I agree completely there. So I really don't think there's much to argue on our running back list. Anybody else have any thoughts on these two? Otherwise, Bryce, why don't you give us your guys?
Yeah, I will say one thing, Sully. I feel like we haven't talked about Connor in any of our episodes yet, and I feel like that's a guy that people are undervaluing, and I'm hoping he has the bounce back year. So I completely agree with that start and your sit. Hate Melvin Gordon.
Thanks.
This year.
Yeah, really quick on Connor. He's a guy I've got a lot of this year just because of that. A really good 0 RB guy this year.
I like it. Yeah. My start and sit. So my start this week, and I like it more after the contract, is Kareem Hunt. And it's quite frankly just because the Browns are playing the Ravens, and if it's anything like last year, the Ravens are going to be scoring a lot of points. And I like Kareem Hunt as more that not only is he going to get a decent amount of touches on the ground, I like him in the pass game. So if you're like kind of iffy on that flex spot, I think Kareem Hunt's a good matchup if you don't like any of your other ones. And my sit is, Jonathan Taylor. I think that a lot of people get hyped up. If you're real thin, obviously you got to start him, but I think a lot of people get that rookie fever. And with no preseason, and I feel like, you haven't got to really watch him play, I would be cautious to start him, in week 1, especially if you have some more veteran options that have proven to be somewhat consistent. So, Menendez, what do you think about my starting sit?
Yeah, I mean Marlon Mack's the guy for me if I'm starting a guy in Indy and running back for sure, at least early on until Jonathan Taylor's up to speed. So yeah, I mean I don't hate on it. I mean I think I think Hunt has the opportunity to be very successful in this offense. I think Stefanski knows what to do with them both. I want to disagree with you guys. Silvers.
Oh, you will. We'll get there.
Yeah, the only thing I've got to add to that is Jonathan Taylor. I mean, we discussed him earlier in the show in our news and notes. I'm not starting him as one of my top 2 running backs, but I'm comfortable starting him in the flex position. Moving on to my start and sit this week, Josh Jacobs is my start. Oakland is starting 2 rookie wide receivers. They're also playing the worst defense in the NFL. So those rookie wide receivers could pop, but what are you going to lean on in week 1? You're going to lean on your running back. And so I think I'm expecting a big day from Josh Jacobs. My sit, Leonard Fournette. Of course, we've had a lot of mixed messages since he started the week in Tampa Bay. First, it's Ronald Jones' backfield. Then Bruce Arians is coming on a lot later on and saying Fournette's going to have a solid role in week 1. Today on the drive home, I was listening to Bruce Arians on NFL radio, and he was talking about how really Ronald Jones is best at the outside run, and he's not that great on the inside zone running. That's what he was, and although he's gotten better, is what he said. So to me, they're saying Ronald Jones is far from a lock to be the guy. Since saying that he's the guy, every other message he's put out there has been Ronald Jones is going to get the first opportunity, but he's not going to be the guy. So long term, I like Leonard Fournette, but with 8 days on the team, I'm not liking him in week 1. Sully, you have anything to add there?
Not really. I think that Jacobs is a great call. He's my number 2 back this week. I think he's going to blow the doors off the Panthers. And Fournette, yeah, I think Bruce Arians must just go home at night and laugh his ass off after all the comments that he's made throughout all the media, because it just seems like it's a big game to him. At the end of the day, you don't draft a guy in the third round and sign 2 veteran running backs because you're in love with your Rojo. So matter of time. Let Ronald Jones get some touches this week. Saints, I do believe, are a pretty good run defense, so it could be a little ugly for him there. But he misses 1 pass protection assignment, and it's see you later.
Agree. Sully, why don't you get us started on quarterbacks?
Yeah. All right. So my start at quarterback, because anybody can just pick a top 10 quarterback, right? My start this week, it's my ride or die all offseason, and it's Phillip Rivers of the Indianapolis Colts. I think the Colts absolutely blow the doors off of the Jaguars. And I think that to tie into that T.Y. Hilton call is that he is going to feast early on the Jaguars enough to warrant a top 12 quarterback finish in week 1. And I am sitting Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers notoriously has struggled against Mike Zimmer and his offenses. It's a tough sledding for him. I think that there's going to be not a whole lot of passing in that football game. I do see that one as one of the lower scoring games of the week, and I'm going to sit Rodgers as a result. All right, let's go.
Yeah, as far as what you said with Rivers, as long as he's got that production early, I think he'll be fine. The concern is if they start hitting big on the run early, because the second half, that's going to be all running for me. And I agree on Rodgers. They get no wide receivers in the draft, so they've got nobody to throw the ball to. Brad, who are your start and sit at the quarterback position?
It's easy for me. I'm going with my guy. He's healthy, at least for probably the better part of the next 7 or 8 weeks, and that's Matthew Stafford. After about 8 weeks, all bets are off. But Stafford, when he's healthy, he's a QB1 in fantasy. I mean, you saw it last year. Up until he got hurt, he was, I think, QB like 8 or something. It was sweet. Unfortunately, it only lasts for a few weeks, and he gets hurt. But my sit is going to be Bryce's guy, Bryce's team, Cam Newton. I like Cam Newton. I think if he stays healthy, Bill Belichick's going to make everybody eat their words on how New England wasn't a playoff team. But I don't trust them week 1, getting off the ground. And I think Miami's getting better. I think that defense has added a lot of pieces, Byron Jones and some of these guys that could easily pick off some of those wobbly duck passes he throws throughout the game. So those are my 2. Bryce, what do you think?
I agree. Cam Newton the Patriots have the worst, right now the worst, wide receiving core when you look at it on paper. Julian Edelman's a timing receiver, so one, off season with Cam Newton, I don't think is going to be the same production you see with Tom Brady. I don't know about Matt Stafford against the Bears defense. I do like him, and he always puts up points, and I can see him. I don't know. I feel like it's a quarterback. If I have Matt Stafford, I probably have someone probably around the same amount of fantasy value as him. So if he has a better matchup, I might lean that way. I'll transition into my start and sit. I've got Bridgewater as my starter, and then Murray as my bench player. I always take a flyer on QBs, so I always get some dudes late. So if I don't like my matchup on my first guy, like if I got Matt Stafford and I got Teddy Bridgewater, I think I might lean Bridgewater for this week because I like the matchup against the Raiders a little bit better, and I think he's a good quarterback with a lot of talent around him. So, Sully, what do you think about my quarterback start and sit?
I think Silvers must hate them because he left. But I'll say this. I think Bridgewater's a safe start. I don't think he's going to wow you by any means. I'd be a heck of a lot more comfortable if this was a super flex or a 2 QB league starting him. I don't know about sitting Murray. And the reason for that is that the Niners, as good a defense as they are, the games in which they struggled last year were against Seattle, Arizona, and Baltimore. And the common trend and theme there is those quarterbacks can move. So I think that Kyler gets them going and gets that line moving around. He had a heck of a good game against them, I believe, the second time they played each other last season. So I'd flip those, to be totally honest with you. It's about time we disagreed on something around here. So I would sit Teddy and I would start Kyler. Mr. Silvers, you came back. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. In fact, Kyler Murray's my start for the week.
All right.
In fact, it wasn't just the last game against the 49ers that he had a good game. Both games, he scored 23-plus fantasy points last year.
There you go.
The 49ers have been a good defense, but Kyler seemed to have their number. I don't know if it's scrambling exactly. I didn't dig too far into it. I just looked at superficially at the scores. Plus, he's adding DeAndre Hopkins, who just got a big deal. He's got his weapons all back from last year. I want Kyler Murray this week for sure. And I know that that's kind of a light one because he's a top 5 quarterback. But when I saw it on the don't start list, I felt like I had to talk about it. I'm all in on Kyler Murray for week 1 against the 49ers. Also, remember, they got rid of DeForest Buckner, so the defense might be down a little bit as well over there. My sit for the week, though, is going to be Joe Burrow. I know he's the guy we've been hyping on all year across the fantasy world. The number 1 overall pick, coming off a historic college football season. But we got to remember, this is the Cincinnati Bengals. We haven't seen anything that, special out of them in years. And they're going up against a pretty darn good secondary in the Los Angeles Chargers, minus Derwin James yet again. But that secondary is fairly solid. So I want to see Joe Burrow put it out on an NFL field before I'm willing to start him. And I know that's going to hurt some people because there's probably a lot of people watching or listening to this podcast who probably drafted him early to be their quarterback this season. And I'm just not comfortable with it yet.
Well, half of Cincinnati already has him in the Hall of Fame, like Bryce mentioned a couple of weeks ago. Not only do they have a good secondary, that pass rush could eat that kid alive. So I agree 100% on sitting Burrow, and I've already talked about your start, so I agree. Bryce?
There's nothing else to be said. Week 1 against a great, arguably one of the best defenses this upcoming year. I'm steering clear against the rookie Joe Burrow. Brad?
I got nothing. You guys all said it. Somewhere I hear Joe Kidder crying inside.
Right.
Well, I'll kick off our tight ends then. My start of the week is Hunter Henry. Tyrod Taylor, if you go back to his time in Buffalo when he was the starting quarterback there, targeted tight end on 22% of his passes. I'm expecting a good week for Hunter Henry. The only guy really to compete with him is going to be Keenan Allen. So I think they're both going to kind of feast in there this week because that's where, and really all year with Tyrod Taylor, they're going to have much better years than Mike Williams. I think that's where Tyrod Taylor lives, is kind of that intermediate route that your tight end and your slot guy run. My sit is Evan Ingram. And, we've heard good hype about Evan Ingram coming back from the foot injury and how great he's looked in camp. And the Giants feel like he's going to be the top receiving wideout in the NFL this year. But, we have really a limited picture of him with Daniel Jones. And I kind of want to see how that plays out. I like to play it safe early in the season and not take the home run shots like the Will Fullers and that kind of thing early in the year. And so I think Evan Ingram is kind of that home run shot. You're expecting a big thing, but you really don't know how that offense works with all of the wide receivers healthy and him healthy. Brad, thoughts on that? Otherwise, give us your guys.
Yeah, I want to disagree, but I don't really have any good reason to disagree. I love Ingram, the player. I think he's their best receiver when they're all healthy. I think he's the most athletic and the gifted. But I'm not upset sitting him. But I don't know how I feel about that one. That's a tough one for me to swallow because I think Ingram's their best receiver. But I'll leave it. I'll agree with it for now because I don't have a good reason to argue it. Otherwise, you're fine. My start is going to be Austin Hooper, Cleveland. The Ravens are leaky along their defense. I mean, at every level of their defense. Obviously, they got rid of Earl Thomas. They're replacing him with a 5th-round safety out of Texas. Their corners are really good, but they're not going to put a corner over Austin Hooper. They got OBJ, Jarvis Landry. I mean, there's too much. So that I think that leaves Hooper open to getting some solid looks. So I feel comfortable starting him at least this week for sure because I think he's got the quickest road to being a tight end 1. Sitting, there's so many sits. I feel like I could sit half the league at tight end this week, probably even more, because there's just so many ugly situations. Probably the ugliest one for me would be whatever Green Bay trots out, because I just don't feel comfortable with any of those tight ends. It doesn't matter who they're playing, but most weeks I'm probably just going to say ignore them. I like Sternberger, the tight end, but I don't know what they're doing. They drafted a kid that's a tight end. They got 7 other guys. I don't even know. So those are my start sits. Sully, what do you think?
All right, so I'll go back to Evan Ingram. I disagree with sitting Evan Ingram, and I say it for this specific reason, pardon me, is that I understand that they're playing the Steelers and that that's a heck of a defense over there. I would say that Saquon Barkley is going to help that entire offense immensely. Daniel Jones is a year older. Their offensive coordinator loves targeting the tight end, has throughout his entire career as an offensive coordinator. And Evan Ingram's the best player on that team in terms of pass catching. And the Steelers are going to blow the doors off the Giants in garbage time counts. My start at tight end, I don't even remember. I'm all worked up. Jonnu Smith is my start at tight end this week. I just really like what that kid did in the back half of the season last year. He's the one piece of the Titans offense that I don't think really regresses much this season. And my sit is Austin Hooper. So
shut your dirty mouth.
That I know, hey? So Kevin Stefanski is going to run the ball down their throat all day long as he can. And I understand that they're going to lose that football game, so he's only going to be able to run the ball for so long. He's got 2 wide receivers that had off years last year, coming back reportedly healthy, that he needs to get in sync with his starting quarterback, and I think he will. Austin Hooper in Atlanta, Dirk Cutter put him out in the flat and threw him the pass. Stefanski's going to keep him in the middle of the field. If Hooper can score, he's start worthy. If he's not, he's probably 4 for 30 and call it a day. Right?
No, Bryce. Back up, Sully. You're wrong.
Go ahead. You want to say something, Brad?
Yeah, I do. Stefanski knows how to use the tight end. I mean, look what he did with Kyle Rudolph for the years that Kyle Rudolph had athletic ability. He was able to get him targets each week for a considerable amount of time. Made Kyle Rudolph better than Kyle Rudolph really was, because Kyle Rudolph wasn't good. And Austin Hooper's got a better athletic profile. Baltimore's defense is rough. I mean, they're starting a lot. They're starting rookies outside of their corners along the middle and some of that. So, man, I don't know, Sully. I don't know that I can agree with that.
Kyle Rudolph, if he didn't score a touchdown, was useless for fantasy football for the last year and a half. He was also the third, probably the number 3 target in that offense. Where's Hooper in that offense? Is he the 4th target or the 5th target?
I'd say 4.
Probably 3. As 3's where I'm thinking. They paid him to be a guy.
They're more targets than over the backs, you figure?
Well, they paid him to be the target. They paid him to target him. They didn't pay him to bring him to block. I mean, that's not what he does.
I'll give you that. Silvers, get control, man. What's going on around here?
Well, you know what? I'm going
it's Bryce's turn.
Sit Austin Hooper bandwagon with Sully, because you're forgetting that the Ravens have a really good nickel corner in Marlon Humphrey, and there is no wide receiver 3 for Cleveland. So who's he going to cover? It's going to be Austin Hooper. So I don't know. Other than Minnesota, does Cleveland run the second most 2 wide receiver packages in the NFL? I feel like they almost have to. They really haven't had anybody step up as a wide receiver 3 for that team. And they haven't addressed it in the draft or anywhere. Free agency, nothing. I mean, they addressed their wide receiver 1, their wide receiver 2, but who's the wide receiver 3? And if you're not going to run a slot guy, that nickel corner, Marlon Humphrey is going to cover Austin Hooper as soon as a linebacker gets speed. So there might be one big play for Austin Hooper, and then I think it's over.
The Vikings ran the least amount of 11 personnel last year, so Stefanski's ready for that. There'll be 2 tight ends on the field the majority of that game.
Right. All right, Bryce, let's move on to your guys here, unless you have more to dump onto the Hooper Express here.
I'm sitting Hooper, but I'm not going to go any further into it. And I like Jonnu Smith, Sully. I have a buddy that's a huge Titans fan. He's all over Jonnu Smith as well. And, when you get some insight and people that watch him every day, you kind of get a little excited as well. Got him in a lot of leagues. I like him for this week as well. And then my start of the week is, I always like to choose some more low-profile guys, especially since I take a flyer. I'm choosing Eric Ebron as my start this week, and my sit is Hurst. I think Hurst going against the Seahawks, a lot of people are hoping he is another Austin Hooper, and I think the Seahawks, if anything, they're going to be better in the middle of the field rather than the outside. When you got Jamal Adams working the middle of the field at safety, and you got Bobby Wagner all over the place in the middle. I don't like the tight end position that week for them, and I like Eric Ebron because I think the Steelers are going to be able to move the ball down the field, and Eric Ebron does his most damage in the red zone. So that's just kind of a short and sweet way to explain my start and sit. Who wants to touch on this first?
Is Ebron the starting tight end, or is it Vance McDonald?
It's Ebron.
It's Ebron.
It's got to be Ebron.
Silvers, what do you think?
They didn't pay him to block.
Yeah.
Is he getting paid? Did they pay him?
I don't know.
I like Ebron as a pick. He's always kind of steady as long as he can not drop the football. So as long as they throw the ball about 12 feet away from where it should be, he should be able to get to it and make a hell of a catch. If they throw it at his numbers, we're in trouble. Hurst, I just don't think he's a guy I faded in all my drafts. I don't own a single share of Hayden Hurst. I'm not interested in Hayden Hurst. So I'll agree with you sitting. You can sit at Hayden Hurst every week all season, and I'll probably agree.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. We want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our Roto Heat content. Before we get to your questions, though, we're going to throw out quickly our flex start of the week. Mine is Boston Scott with Miles Sanders' injury and his status, whether he might be limited or not. I feel like Boston Scott out of the flex is going to be a good start for you. Bryce, who's your start of the week at the flex position?
With the Damian Harris news, I like Sony Michel this week. I think he's the clear runner in the Patriots organization, and I think they lean on the run game. So I'm going with Sony this week. Sully, who's yours?
Tyrell Williams tore his labrum. He's out for the season. The Raiders are running out there Henry Ruggs, their first-round pick, and Brian Edwards. And everybody is missing the point that Hunter Renfrow is the guy that you should be starting in that offense this week against that horrific Carolina defense. Brad?
I like it. Sony was going to be my guy. I did not realize that Bryce was going to do Sony. So I'll go Phillip Lindsay because I think he's the back in Denver that really is going to produce. So if you need a running back, Phillip Lindsay should be cheap. He'd be a guy I would start in flex and feel pretty good this week.
All right. So moving into our questions, starting on the YouTube, and I'll just give everybody kind of a question as we move through this list. We'll start with Brad. Out of this group, who are you going to start? I'm going to assume it's going to be 2 wide receivers and 1 flex. You've got Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Jarvis Landry, DJ Shark, and Deontay Johnson.
So I have to start 2 of them?
I would say start 2 wide receivers and a flex.
And that's like 3 of the 4 guys, eh?
3 of the 5.
Who
are you sitting is the question.
Yeah, so who are you sitting from that group of 5? Kupp, Woods, Landry, Shark, and Deontay Johnson.
Well, Deontay Johnson easily is the sit for me just because we don't know what he is going to be with Roethlisberger. The rest of those guys have clearly defined roles. Yeah.
Bryce?
Are you shaking your head no, Bryce?
No, I was itching my...
Oh, I thought he was ready to pounce.
I'm about to say, I needed to hear something.
I agree. I think this is an easy question.
All right. Well, Bryce, you're going to get question number 2 because you were talking some DFS before this stream started.
Yeah.
And this is kind of related. Over-under, low to mid-40s in the shootout for the Chiefs-Texans being 45 or 54 and a half. So where do you think it falls, I guess? Over-under? Or I'm
over-under what, 54 and a half?
Yeah, 54 and a half, I guess.
I'm going to go with the over.
That's
a hard one, though. Yeah, but I go the over.
Okay. Sully, your question, start Melvin Ingram or Antonio Gibson at RB2?
Melvin Gordon, I'm assuming.
Melvin Gordon?
Or Mark
excuse me, Mark Ingram.
Okay.
Or Mark Ingram or Antonio Gibson.
Oh,
Yeah, it would help if I
the question got a whole lot
properly.
easier.
Yeah.
I'd probably start, without a doubt, Ingram out of those two. He's the man in Baltimore for now. And Gibson, I think Washington's similar to Detroit. It's a bit of a hodgepodge, and you should stay away for now.
All right. Let's see. What do we have next here? Looks like that is our questions on that end. On Facebook, what do we have for questions over there? Doesn't look like we have a whole lot there. So, all right. Well, those are our questions for the week. We did get asked, did we really just say Hunter Renfrow? And yeah.
Hell, yeah, I did.
Sully likes the guy.
Take a look at Hunter Renfrow, how he finished the season. He had 2 games towards the end of the season with 22-plus fantasy points in PPR scoring. Derek Carr loves him. Gruden loves him. He's the man in the slot in that offense to start off the season. Take it to the bank, DFS, redraft, dynasty, IDP. I don't care. Get Hunter Renfrow in your lineup this week. Fired up. It's football tomorrow.
I don't know how I skipped over this one, but we do have another Raiders question. So you don't have Hunter Renfrow. Who are you going to start, Edwards or Ruggs? I'll start with this one. I have both of them. In the matchup I need the home run. I need the big week, so I'm starting Henry Ruggs. If I needed the safe play, I'd be starting Bryan Edwards. Anybody disagree with that?
No, you start Ruggs. Gruden has an ego. He's going to take a couple home run shots and validate that.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's going to, I think, wrap us up for this week since we don't have any other questions out there. Once again, if you want your questions answered, your sit starts heading into week 2, tune in next Wednesday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. It'll be the 4 of us, Bryce Frazier, Rob Sullivan, the man who's his own agent, Brad Menendez, and myself, Rob Silvers, with the Fantasy Inferno. Again, that's 9:30 every Wednesday night here on YouTube and Facebook. And, of course, you can listen to the podcast anytime on your favorite podcast platform by looking at the Fantasy Inferno. Make sure you tune into all of our other shows. Head on over to the website. Check out the great articles that are being pumped out by Sully and Jacob Wallace and the other guys. Brad and Jay Wall also pumping out videos left and right on players here on YouTube. So we got a bunch of content coming your way. Head over to Patreon. That's scrolling along at the bottom of the screen, rotoheat.com/Patreon. Join the Patreon, get our access to our rankings, also to the special live start show on Sundays. Now, Bryce, you got to remind me on these times because I still don't have them locked in. You and Rick are doing the open show first for an hour, and then you're doing the show just for the patrons. Following that, can you give us the times on those on Sunday mornings?
Yes. It'll be Sunday mornings for everyone from 10 to 11. We'll take a 15-minute quick break, and we'll go from 11:15 to 12:15 for all the Patreons.
And again, that's Eastern, just like all of our times with our programs here on rotoheat.com. For Sully, Bryce, and Brad, thanks for listening this week and watching, and we'll see you next week to recap what should be a fun week 1. Thank goodness football's finally here. We've got all the kindling that was our shows for the last 2 months out of the way, and now it's time to throw it all into the